will call the meeting to order, please. We are special general committee budget meeting. It is 7 minutes after 9. No, sir. I just wanted to update you on the status of input from the public through our email system. Okay. We've received only one, and that's an anonymous, unsolicited email from China wanting us to buy a lot of wallets from them. That's the extent of our budget consultation email. So that would be I don't given the state of the economy, I don't think there's anything in those wallets that they're trying to sell us. But that would be a capital item. Very much, Mr. We will move on to considerations of items of first councillors, given the fact that there's only 5 this year. No one can leave until we take a break. So needs to take a break, please. We do have one member of the public here, so we can take it as well. It will be a little informal here, Mr. Jones. We've just gone through the public part because there's no one here. Do you have anything you'd like to contribute at this point? Thank you. So I would call last our budget for 2014. We were missing 3 members of council during the first part of the capital budget. Well, your point is well taken. I did contact the 3 councillors who advised us that we would not be here today. Councillor Beer will be here today. Councillor Kim and Councillor Tom can't make it. I did email both of them and asked them if there was any particular items that they wanted hold for discussion later, and I didn't hear back from either one. That whether or not we could revisit any items is a decision of council. So it would, if council decides to do that, then Councillor Abel, we will do it. If council decides no, we have enough warning to be here, then we won't. So that would be a decision of council.
So, if I may, Mr. Mayor, just so we're aware, council may decide to go through this first session a second time as they did in 2014.
Council could make that decision on a majority vote.
Thank you very much.
We will move to considerations of, well, we do have another councillor here, so if somebody wants to leave, they can. We won't break quorum, so that's probably if someone needs a quick recess. Yeah, convenience break. Thank you, Mr. CAO. The first item, we tend to be a little more fluid, a little less formal at our GC budget meeting, so I would put item 1 on the floor right now so that we can follow that particular process, and then we'll talk to it. So if someone would just put that on the floor, please. Councillor Thompson, thank you. Is there a second? Councillor Humphreys? Thank you. Mr. Elliott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whoa, we're a little strong. This asset management plan has, the genesis of this is a requirement from the province and the federal government to have a council-approved asset management plan in place by the end of 2015. This is a little unusual in that this is a highly administrative and technical type document, far from that's the norm for a council approval. And so it's a little disconcerting to me that there's so much detail in here, and yet the province wants us to have a council approval on it. The asset management plan in its own right is a documentation of the methodologies and the analysis being done by each asset manager group as they evaluate their assets. They can monitor their conditions, they make decisions on replacement, and they've got various evaluation tools being used in different asset categories. And so it becomes a very technical document. The executive summary is very useful in that it gives a high-level overview. The asset management plan leads to the 10-year capital plan, and then, as I said the last time, our 2016 detailed capital program falls from the 10-year capital. So it's a Genesis-type document. Our intent is to bring it before council once per term with administrative updates in between. So we'll update it for numeric values, the most recent capital values, and the number of assets, sort of the inventory in those. We'll update that every year administratively, but we will bring this document forward to council for awareness and sort of refreshing that approval. Again, a highly technical document, very interesting read for some, but really I think it's a little unusual to have a council approval on something this detailed. But I leave it to you, and the province requires us to have an approval, and so that's what we're seeking today.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. And Council, just before I go to you for questions, I'm going to suggest that the motion, based on page 5 of the asset management plan, there's a schedule in here to go to, it actually comes to council on December the 8th for approval. So I would suggest that the second clause should really be that the asset management plan be forwarded to council for their approval. Madam Clerk, would that be, could you help, please?
That would be in order unless Mr. Elliott has something to add.
Mr. Elliott?
The implementation schedule here was put in with sort of, we have to have it approved by the end of the year. So the last council meeting is December the 8th. There is operating budget anticipated to come forward there. This is actually more part of the capital budget, and so we were hoping for an earlier approval, but if deferral to the 8th is fine. If this committee was to move it forward, we would bring it forward to council shortly thereafter.
I'm simply going by the fact that this plan has been out in public and the schedule is therefore out in public
Okay.
as well. That's all. But
Not a
anyways,
problem.
I'll open it up for council discussion, and then we can modify as such. So council, I will open it up for any comments or questions on the asset management plan. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Just a brief one. Obviously, we saw this earlier in the year as we went through the 2014 budget process. And Mr. Elliott spoke briefly with regards to some administrative changes, but I just want to confirm that there's no significant or substantive changes since we last saw this earlier in the year as part of the 2015 budget cycle.
That's absolutely correct. We have gone through it, and we've attempted to catch all of the miscellaneous little typos. There's a lot of detail in this. We have added the references to the IT assets that were not in it last year, and so that a very small group of our assets, but important, and we just wanted to make sure that it was complete in that regard. And we have updated the values to reflect the 2015 10-year capital plan.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Maybe as a suggestion, as we do this year after year, that there is a sort of a one-pager outlining what changes, if any, are being made to make it simpler for us to be able to identify. Thanks.
Councillor Humphreys. Okay. Any other comments on the asset management plan? Mr. Elliott, just a couple from me. And there's actually some questions at some point that I'd like to get into, so I don't know if we should do it now or if we should do it further along in the process. And I guess really it's more of a procedural in just understanding some of the criteria here. But first of all, I want to commend you and your staff, and actually all staff, for the obvious amount of work that went into this. Although some parts are pretty scary, quite frankly, that the replacement value of, what is it, sewers and or water mains is higher than our entire asset base. So it kind of makes you wonder how you're going to, if there was a catastrophic failure, how you plan for that, which, quite frankly, speaks to the fact that I guess this council and last council were very diligent about ensuring that we're putting money aside, putting it in that piggy bank. It doesn't sound so great when you're doing it, but in terms of the long-term financial viability of the town, it's absolutely essential. There is, if you could quickly flip to page 12, and this is kind of a generic comment. And this just happens to be the solid waste services, and there's some KPIs, there's some metrics in here. So there's the performance metric and the target. I presume those are annual targets, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So then, is there a methodology, is there going to be a way, and maybe this is a question for the CAO, is there going to be a way to put these metrics into something that we can track on a fairly easy basis? So here's where we are for 2015 at this point, and here's where we should be, and here's what we're doing to improve if needs be. Mr. CAO.
Yeah, I believe that in your budget now, on an annual basis, there is a schedule relating to key performance indicators. So I would expect that key performance indicator schedule in the budget would be updated to reflect these numbers.
Okay, great. That's really the only question I have. Is there any? It's more of a process. Any other comments or questions? So, Council, then, are you comfortable with us just with budget committee approving the plan and then having it move forward for final acceptance at Council? Okay, so then the motion can stand as it is. Calling the vote, then, all in favor? Contrary? That's carried, Madam Clerk. The next item is the review of the 10-year capital investment plan. And the motion is that we receive for information. Councillor Thompson? Okay with moving that, Councillor Gardner, or Councillor Gardner, you okay? Seconding? Thank you. Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, this is the result of, call it the work of what is set out in the asset management plan. The asset management plan helps us evaluate our assets, helps us plan ahead, look at their service life, their service history, and their replacement needs, and we map out and document a 10-year plan for the existing assets. Then we separately look out and we incorporate our growth assets as we see them coming forward. And then we also plan, call them periodic studies and other projects that require smoothing of the tax rate. Things like review of the official plan, zoning updates and that kind of stuff. So we have a number of studies in there. There's only 2 this year. So the 10-year capital plan really helps lay out and helps the asset managers plan ahead. It helps lay out for members of council and the public if they're interested in, the road that I drive on seems to be in really bad shape. I wonder when they're planning on fixing that. They should be able to see that within the 10 years. If it's fairly rough already, it should be within the next 10 years. But then they'll be able to see which ones are perhaps scheduled to come earlier. And then you should be able to see that, oh yes, okay, Edward Street is in worse condition than my street, so it makes sense that that's this year and mine's not until next. And so the 10-year capital plan really then becomes a foundation for us here in finance to take those values and map them out and make sure that we have the funds available at the right time. We do the reserve fund study and map those out and make sure that the 10-year capital plan is affordable. And as I said the last time, as long as we stick to the plan that we have, we'll be fine. And the 10-year capital plan is calling for a 1% of tax levy increase to our contributions to reserves every year for the next 10 years. And as you saw in the asset management plan, when simply the underground water, sewer, and storm pipes accumulate quickly to the replacement value of about $1.7 billion, we need contribution to our reserves. Now, fortunately, those are very long life assets, 75 to 100 years in some cases. And so the town, at this point in time, as we look forward down the road, we're in fairly good shape as long as we stick to our plan.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Councillors, comments or questions on the capital asset, or pardon me, the 10-year capital investment plan? Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I just wanted to thank you again for great items for us to move and advance forward, because in the first term we didn't really have a detailed comprehensive look of what's before us. Trying to understand all this is another matter, but at least we're starting to see something, so I appreciate that very much. But I did want to point out that we did apply for Canada's 150th anniversary, and we did receive some grant money, and I did make a remark and ask you at that time, Mr. Elliott, that it was great to see that you had projects ready for application, that we were successful in getting some funding. I think it was almost $500,000 for 3 different items. And if you could comment and confirm that one of the reasons you got that grant through is because you were able to go to such a plan, a 10-year capital investment plan, to identify and earmark what applied and what you felt would be a benefit to the town.
Mr. Elliott.
Absolutely. This, again, this 10-year capital plan, there's a large handful of individuals throughout the organization, primarily in IES and parks, that manage each category of assets. So we have a fleet manager, we have a facilities manager, we have parks manager, and roads and other infrastructure. They're individuals that look at these plans and lay them all out and make sure that they have their own internal capacities to deliver these projects if the funding is put there, but also that they're necessary at the appropriate times to maintain the service levels. When we then had the opportunity to apply for this funding from the feds, we were able to look ahead, work with each of those asset managers and say, is there something that could be done a little earlier if the money was there? And we brought forward a handful of projects and some that had actually been delayed a bit and said, yes, we should be doing these. And we bundled them together, and Laura is our grants writer, and we were able to pull all of this together. And so it's a collective effort. Both the asset management plan and this document is the work of a large group of people throughout the organization.
Just more to that point, I think that the town of Aurora has participated with in an advocacy effort that FCM manages, and you have a member of council who serves on the FCM board, and AMO. And I think as a result of the advocacy work of both of those organizations, there's a greater understanding and awareness of the need to invest at the federal and provincial levels in municipal infrastructure. I'm sure when you listen to all of the platforms of the 3 or 4 major parties as part of this federal election, there's a considerable amount of discussion about infrastructure plans that will be available to municipalities, cities, towns, and communities across the country. And I think to Councillor Abel's point, typically what will happen after an election, there will be announcements about infrastructure programs. And the key component in those infrastructure programs relate to the ability of the local municipality to be able to deliver on the project quickly. So shovel-ready projects are incredibly important. The fact that you have an asset management plan, the fact that you have a 10-year capital investment plan, and the fact that you've identified these projects and they're ready to go, puts you ahead of others who are competing for those dollars. So it comes full circle, I think, as a consequence of investing in and participating in FCM, AMO, and other advocacy groups. Federal and provincial governments are now appreciating the value of investing in infrastructure. Frankly, 10 years ago, not so much, but now very much. And there's an understanding across the country that investing in infrastructure creates immediate jobs, but also helps in the quality of life for communities. So I think you're very, very well positioned to take advantage of funding after a federal election because you are ahead of many municipalities in terms of having a 10-year approved capital plan.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Councillor Thompson. I'm sorry, Councillor Abel? No. You follow? Okay. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. And I agree with what's been said with regards to this being an excellent planning tool. It's certainly one that's a little easier to follow than the asset management plan that preceded it. You know, there's some great things, and I just want to make a couple comments as well as maybe some suggestions going forward about looking at ways to enhance the overall plan. I think that the summary graph on page 6 is an excellent way to start off. It certainly identifies how we're replenishing the reserves, be it through development charges, be it through, cash to capital or other sources. I mean, it's important to note that of the $36 or $38 million that we collect through taxation, I mean, nearly $4 million will go back to the reserves this year alone. And so that's an important investment that we make annually to be able to top up the reserves. But I think there's some value in trying to harmonize some of our plans, and this is one of them. We talk often about, our strategic plan. We look at our population growth plans and so forth. All of those seem to accumulate to 2031. And I think there's some value in taking a look at harmonizing this plan with some of those other plans. And I know we sit with a 10-year horizon, but maybe stretch it out to that 15-year horizon so that it aligns with other things that the town is doing from a 2031 perspective. You look at it, and then you can overlay some of those things like the growth of the population in the community, building statistics and so forth, so that it provides an additional look or context for how we're putting money into the DC, or how we're putting money into the reserve, be it through DCs or anything. But I just think that perhaps maybe through you to Mr. Elliott, that's something that the Finance Committee could look at, on an ongoing basis on how to supplement the information presented in this so that it aligns with some of the things we're doing elsewhere. And I think the only other point I want to make is, the other thing is, over the 10 years, we've identified $200 million worth of projects. And so I think it's always important for us to take a moment and look back at some of those projects and make sure we have accurate costs. And I know last year there was some conversation around facilities. And I still see within the document that we identified the need for a new recreational facility, but we're still only saying $12 million. And I think it's fair to say that $12 million is not going to get you a new recreational facility. You look at the SARC, which was built many years ago, it was over $20 million. You look at the cost of the JOC, and even if you just look at the leisure complex in terms of an addition and renovation, it cost us 2/3 of that. And so I think it's important for us to look back at these numbers and have better accurate numbers, because as we said from the beginning, the only way to replenish it is either through DCs, cash to capital, right, or other sources like feds and sale of lands. And if we don't have the right numbers, then over the 10-year course, we'd be off. Out of $200 million, if we're off by 10%, that's $20 million. Where is that coming from? And if it's not coming from DCs, then it has to be made up through the tax levy. And so I think there's some value in reassessing some of the numbers here, especially when it comes to facilities.
Mr. Elliott.
Through you, Mr. Chair. That was a very strong point when our ELT table was looking at this as in its final version. Was we zeroed in on that community center that's specific, is the values that are in there are rising from the funding that's available to us through the DC program, and not reflective of the total cost of an expected plan. I think we expect to be doing some work around developing a block plan for that community center in the coming months, and seeing if we can't get a report towards council in regards to what does that look like, what does that, where might it be, but also more importantly, how will we be funding this? Because you're absolutely right, it's not a $12 or $14 million facility, it's probably over 30. And so we're looking at some other alternative funding sources or financing it. So we'll be, I'm sure that we'll have some conversation around that in the next year, and next year's plan will have the updated value in it.
I appreciate that, Mr. Elliott. And even if that number is a placeholder because of the DCs collected, I think still, we talk about the fact that we need to, annually increase our cash to capital reserves by 1% in order for over a 10-year span to put us back in the black, right? And so, if there are projects that we're going to have to find additional funding for that will draw further from those cash to capital reserves or reserves in general, I just think it's important for us to be able to identify it, because then you have to relook at the strategy. Because 1% may not be enough. Or we may have to look at other projects and say, what's the priority? But please don't misinterpret it. I think it's an excellent document. I think it's provided great value since we first introduced it. I just think that, as like anything, we can continue to enhance it.
Or we could have a special tax levy, say, on all properties east of Bayview. could probably pass that right now. Other comments or questions on that? That was a joke. On the capital plan? Councillor Gardner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following up on what Mr. Elliott said. So if the value example of $12 million for the new community center is, I believe, as you said, the money that's available to us through DCs. Our DC plan is it every 5 years that we update it?
That's correct. And for recreation, it's a function, the DC money that becomes available is a function of the existing service levels. It's not a function of the community's need. It's the existing service levels, and it sort of does a mathematical calculation and says, this is how much you can collect from the DCs. Do you have a plan that you could spend this money on? And so it's unfortunate that it's not the other way, which is done in works, is the DC study says, what do you need to build? How much does it cost? That's the DC charge. So it's very different. And so the service levels decline when we do not keep up with our investment in our growth facilities for things like parks and libraries and recreation. And so the DC study, just renewing it or renewing it early does not necessarily give us a higher DC charge.
Thank you. And so that answered my question. But when we had our service level review, Aurora has a higher service level than many other municipalities. And even with that, if it's based on service level, the DCs are based on service level, even with that, we could only collect the $12 million. Thank you.
Is that a question or a comment?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I nodded. Yes, in the affirmative.
I'm sorry, Mr. Elliott, we couldn't hear it. Any other comments or questions on the 10-year capital? All in favor then? Contrary? It's carried. Thank you. Item 11, the status, which is the first 2 pages in tab 11. Councillor Humphreys, would you care to move that? Thank you. Councillor Maracas, second. Mr. Elliott. This is so far the Mr. Elliott show.
That's fine. Again, understand, I don't do all of this myself. I've got 3 great staff in the back. I've got Jason to my right, or to my left, and my colleagues all around the table. This schedule is a categorization of each of our reserve funds. You'll recall that recently we began documenting each of these reserves in a bylaw, so that members of the public can see exactly what these are, what they're intended to be used for. And that little reference down the middle, R&R 1, R&R 2, those are the schedules to the reserve fund bylaw that would document that particular reserve. It's important that to understand these are the estimated ending 2015 balances as at the end of August, our best estimates. So as we bring forward the 2016 capital, these balances reflect the approval of those capital projects. So it's also important not to sort of add them all up and say, what is our total reserve position? Because they're all for different purposes. And so they shouldn't be thought of as one commingled set of available funds. Rather, they're a large group of different funds. So we have tax rate funded infrastructure sustainability reserves, $3.5 million. Utility rate funded reserves for doing the undergrounds, $3.7 million. So in total for infrastructure, we say 7.4, but again, 2 different purposes. Reserves for new infrastructure, again, we've got the DCs in there, but we've also got sale of lands, we've got cash in lieu of parking, or cash in lieu of park land. You'll notice that that is significantly smaller than last year because we've acquired a number of parcels of land with that this year. And so that is down from about 14 million down to about 4. So we see those. We've got a Parks New Capital, and we've also got this new community benefit fee that we've been collecting that will help towards a thing like a community center. But that's $1.2 million at this point in time. Then we go into special purpose reserves. We got stabilization reserves. unearned revenue. These are fees that we collect, but it's sort of, it's collected up front, and then the work that's required on account of that is done in later years, and so those are set aside. And then other special purpose of reserves, heritage, arts and culture, green initiatives, the cenotaph restoration. So there's something in there for pretty much anything and everything. And then it wraps up with our hydro reserves down at the bottom. And because the library is, they have reserves as well, they consolidate into ours. And so I note them there, but these are library managed reserves of about $750,000.
Mr. Elliott, any comments or questions for this particular item? That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm looking on page 11 too. The Kajenlu Parkland, you said, went down from 14 million to 4 million. Could you just summarize where that was spent, please?
Mr. Elliott?
I think Mr. Downey might be able to help me out, but I know that the largest piece was the Hallmark acquisition and also the Mavernack lands. So both of those purchases were funded from Kajenlu Parkland.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mr. Downey, do you have those numbers off the top of your head?
Mr. Mayor, the Hallmark was, I apologize, I don't have the number exactly, but around $6 million. And the Mavernack lands are 2.4.
So that's 8. The Armory?
550?
That's 8.5. So we got $1.5 million.
Excuse me, the armories were 660. I hear the conversation going. I just don't know whether it was purchased at a cash in lieu.
So then there's just another $1 million. I'm just wondering if, I'm just trying to recall the items. I mean, I appreciate very much acquiring it. And finally, we're purchasing land, because that's just collecting money for quite some time. So there probably is at least one more other item that we can't recall.
Through you, Mr. Chair, after the break, we'll have a quick list of that. Somebody will look it up for us.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Any other questions on this item? Councilor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I noticed when I was going through this that there's something called a furniture fixture replacement reserve. That must fall in one of these categories.
Through you, Mr. Chair, actually, it's up in the, it's the third one down on page 11.1. It's facilities R&R, and this is where the furniture, fixtures, and equipment would come from, with the exception of IT equipment, which is separately a little further down. It's R&R 6.
Councilor?
Well, each of these has many, each of these reserves then, it seems to me, has many subcategories in them. With just the furniture and fixtures, I would have perhaps appreciated a note in the report as to what part of the reserve it was actually coming from. And is there a way to get a list of all the things that are included in the various reserve funds?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the reserves are, the delineation of them is as shown here. We do not track subcomponents of them necessarily. Within the DCs, there is some breakdown within the DC background study, but when it comes to the pool of available funds, as long as it's used for parks development and facilities, outdoor recreation, that funding can be used for those. The reserve fund schedules, as I referred to earlier, the R&R 1, 2, 3, and 4, these are all part of the reserve fund bylaw, and those are available right from our website. There's a schedule of reserve funds, and there's a live link beside each title as to which it says roads and related R&R. If you click on the R&R 1 that will be there, it will open the actual schedule, and it'll tell you where those funds come from, what they would be used for, if there's a target balance of any sort, can they be used for any other purposes, and so on. And so they're all right there and available to members of the public and yourselves.
Councillor?
Thank you. Could you just repeat that one more time?
Perhaps at the break, I can show you the specific schedule. I'll project it up on the screen. But on our website in the Financial Services Department, or Corporate and Financial Services Department, there's a tab or a click on reserve funds, and it has a brief blurb, and down at the bottom there's a link to the actual schedule, which is this document in front of you, and then these references that say R&R 1, for example. You double click that and it opens up to the actual reserve fund bylaw schedule that describes what this reserve is for and where the money comes from and what it can be used for, and if it can be used for anything else, and so on, because some of them can be repurposed and other reserves cannot. And so it's very important to be transparent, and this is why we went through that exercise of trying to document every one of these reserves.
Councillor?
I'll show it to you during our break.
Thank you. And just a general question to the councillor sitting at this table. If a resident was to ask you how to find out this more minute detail, would anybody have been able, am I the only one who would have had no idea how to tell a resident to go through this? And how are the residents supposed to know that they can do this? Through you, Mr. Mayor?
I'm going to direct that question actually to the CAO, because quite frankly, it's a communications issue, it's not a financial issue.
Well, it is on the website. I think maybe what we could do after the break is actually, if we can, try to stream something live or maybe show you directly. I'm assuming there's a search engine on the website itself that takes you to that point, but I think it would be worthwhile to do this in the council chambers after the break.
Well, thank you, Mr. CEO. And also, I mean, for the general public, with respect to accountability, transparency, communication, if there could be something perhaps under our budget heading that said, if you want to know, this is what you do.
Mr. CEO?
If I could, I think this illustrates the need, and I think it was expressed earlier, that once the budget is struck, there will be a simple, plain, easy to understand communication plan that goes with the budget. So where does the money go? How much money is in reserve? What are the projects? Because it should be readily apparent to the public what their taxes are going towards. So that's really part of the communication plan, which is being developed in parallel with the budget. So on December the 8th, when the budget is struck, there will be a communication rollout describing what's in the budget, what's the level of reserve, where's the money going, and what people are getting, or what taxpayers are getting for their tax dollars.
And I think that was an excellent idea, and it is an overview. So, unfortunately, we only have one resident in the audience, but it is a Monday. That doesn't mean that other people aren't interested. Somebody may want to know exactly what I just asked. So, how do they find that out? I mean, they can call us because we now know, or I now know, but how could they find that out without calling staff?
It's a valid point. I think the CAO has addressed it. We'll come back to it, but just on the health reserve.
Thank you, but just to the point, I'm not talking about general overview.
I've got Councillor Thompson and Councillor Humphries.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Through to Mr. Elliott. Mr. Elliott, I think the schedule of reserve funds is a great snapshot. Is it possible to, at some point, not today, just to sort of put it in context with regards to all the forecast and cash flow graphs that are part of that 10-year plan? Because I think that it's a great snapshot, but it would be good to see in some cases where it may look like the funds are low in certain ones, be able to reference back to the 10-year forecast that we had in the previous ones to show that, yeah, the plan is there for it to grow into a healthier position. Because I know for myself, when I flip back and forth, it's not easy to follow the line between how we've set it up in the snapshot, the schedule of reserve funds reports, and the graphs that are presented in the previous item. Great. and as for Councillor Gartner's questions, I think it's a perfect role for Access Aurora. I mean, if residents are looking, you can certainly direct them to Access Aurora, and I'm sure they would work with the Finance Department to help respond to our residents. Oh, look, we have somebody from Access Aurora here.
That's right. Miss Access Aurora herself. Councillor Humphreys.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the report and the status for sure. And I have to apologize, I wasn't at the kickoff meeting where this report was even, I think, focused on a bit further. I'm not going to repeat some of the comments that were just stated, but I think I really appreciate the information here, and I think it's getting to where we need to be. But I do think, in terms of layout, I'll talk to Mr. Elliott afterwards and talk, and in terms of communication plan moving forward. But thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this item? All in favor then? Contrary? That is carried. Thank you. Well, according to the schedule I sent out, it was now time for a break, but we're a wee bit ahead. So we'll move so on page 11-4 and 11-5, there is a summary of the draft 2016 R&R capital projects. Mr. Elliott, do you have your magic sheet up there, that the ABCD sheet?
We have, I believe, an ABCD sheet right here. As we go through these, first we're going to go through in groups. So we're going to look at repair and replacement first, and we'll complete that if we can. Then we will go to turn our attention to growth and new, and then studies and others. So as we go through these, just to refresh members of committee, committee can approve them as is, and I think part of the intent is to do this a bit on consent agenda style, but approve as is, and the project will proceed to tender, and then if it's large enough, council will see the award of tender. You can give it a B for a conditional budget approval pending further detailed report. So if you think that we should get some better information about this project before you give it final approval before tender, then that would be the case. You can defer the project to a future year, or you can delete and perhaps give us some other direction. No, we don't want to go down that path. Cancel that, get rid of that idea. We're now heading in a different direction. Because anything that does not get approved generally just slides towards the next year in our 10-year plan, and it just stays on the books until either the directors remove it or council removes it. So that's why the delete option is there for council. So A, B, C, or D, and we'll work with the clerk afterwards to formalize the minutes to a consistent format. But before we get started, I just wanted to look at page 11-3. Very briefly, you can see that the 2016 capital program is smaller than 2015. And it's important to note that in 2015, there was a number of fairly substantive projects that, in their own merit, 4 projects added to $5.2 million, and we simply don't have projects of that scale this year. There was the repaving at the ACC for $1.4 million last year. There was a roofing project at AFLC for $2 million. And then there was a couple of reconstruction of Bluegrass steeplechase, as well as the intersection at Wellington and Industrial Parkway for $3.8 million together. So there was a substantial amount of, these 4 large projects that sort of stood out from the list, and they're just, we don't have anything of that scale this time around.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. So council, items 11.6 through 11.26 are facilities. So is there anything specifically in there that you would like discussed? Councillor Abel.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I wouldn't mind going through a few of the items, starting with the counter enhancements.
Okay.
And just so I sort of get a weight on this is a counter for $175,000.
Yeah, all I want to do right now
Oh,
is
just
look at
highlight
the
it?
specific items within that block, if there's anything that you would like to discuss. So you,
That one to start.
11.6. Anything else, Councillor? Councillor Thompson?
11-11.
11.11. Councillor Gardner?
11.8, 11.15.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus, did you have your hand up?
I did.
Okay. Councillor Humphries, okay, so,
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Sorry,
Councillor Abel?
and I also have more.
okay, Councillor Abel?
1123, please.
23, okay. And Councillor Gardner?
I
Councillor
have 11, 19, 20, and 26.
I'm sorry?
11, 19, 20, and 26.
26?
Is that what it is?
Councillor Marcus?
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay.
So I've got 11.6, 8, 11, 15, 19, 20, 23, 26, is that correct? No.
What are we not talking about?
What are we not talking about?
Yeah, that's what I have here on the sheet.
11,
6,
7,
7, oh, do we do 6?
21, and 24.
Yeah,
Okay. So then may I suggest that we motion for item, to approve each project as is would apply to 11.7, 21, and 24. Someone care to move that, please? Councillor Marcus, Councillor Thompson, all in favor? Contrary? That's carried. We'll just go in order then. So 11.6, please, which is counter enhancements, thank you. I was looking for the, Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I don't know if it's fair because I know Tasha's away, but I wanted to sort of get an idea of the volume of services. I get the idea that it could be better suited, the counter. And I have been up there, I guess, over the years, and you see activity going on. But how many applications are we talking about in a year, perhaps, through you, Mr. Mayor?
It would, planning and, do you know, Ivy? Do you have a sense? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, the counter sees thousands of permits, including residential permits, developer permits. Anything that requires a permit in Aurora would be serviced at that counter. And currently it's a 10-by-3 space. So that department also has the challenge that they don't have dedicated meeting room space. So currently, I believe Tasha has documented this for a little while now with the manager of facilities, where we have professionals that come in, such as architects, designers. I know we have a designer that comes in frequently in a wheelchair. That counter is substantially high. So it's not just the accessibility of the counter, but it's the function of the counter. Because you have 2 to 3 staff looking at plans, and you have a 3 feet space to spread them out. And it's very difficult to serve more than one person. And I know that team has found it quite challenging through the 2C lands permit process, where we actually have a very ancient student desk set up in the hallway up there. I don't know if anyone's been up there recently, but we've gone to setting up a student desk and chair just to assist with the congestion.
Councillor Abel?
Well, that's very valuable information. Then it's just basically, I would like to know why a counter costs $175,000, because we just put in a granite counter, and it's huge, and it costs $6,000. So for the layman, you have to, maybe it's more than just that, the scope of the work. Are we knocking walls out to increase and put in double the space, occupancy, and so I have to understand that sort of idea, Mr. Mayor, before I can proceed with this.
No, that's a very fair and excellent question. My understanding is that that number includes the configuration of the staff in that immediate area. So that would also include that Technion that has to be tear down, reconfigured, rewired, the IT components. So my understanding is that number from IES includes that reconfiguration of the space. It's not just a removal of the counter and put something new up. That area has to be reconfigured.
I'll go to Mr. Simonovskis too.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Ivy, Ms. Hendrickson is correct, and the scope of work is actually more than just a counter. There's actually a reconfiguration of an office space as well. So it's an area around that current counter that's basically twice the size. So we literally have to take apart that whole area and reconstruct it. So based on our experience, both with the reconstruction of the front counter here, as well as works that we've done in other facilities, the budget has been identified as an amount necessary to do all those backbone operations and build the facility or the counter area and then the actual counter itself, which is really an inexpensive part of the overall project.
Councillor?
Thank you very much.
Councillor Thompson?
Similar questions. I mean, myself as well, I was a little surprised to see that it was $175,000 for mill work. It just, the way it was being presented here. So I think I would be more comfortable with B, which is typically just, you know, conditional approval pending a further report to talk about that scope and get a few more details, especially since now that I'm hearing it's also reconfiguration of workspace. One of the items that we're going to be talking about soon enough is also reconfiguration of workspace for town hall, essentially. So I think I'd be more comfortable with B myself.
Councillor Gardner?
Just wanted to second that and ask if it was going to be done in-house.
Mr. Simonovskis?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, the work will be done by a contractor. If there's any aspects of it that we can do in-house, we will, but the work is fairly extensive.
Councillor? Councillor Thompson, are you moving B?
Yes, B.
Councillor Gardner seconded. Any further comments or questions on that? All in favor? Contrary? Carried. Item 11-8. I'm sorry, I don't know who pulled that. I'm sorry?
I think I did. There's two things I noted here. One that said the clubhouse is used during the summer through you to whoever. Is the clubhouse got air conditioning? Looks like Mr. Downey.
I don't think it does.
So then,
I think it does.
Just so we can hear. No, Mr. Mayor, I do not believe the clubhouse. I've been in there a few times. I don't recall seeing air conditioning. Yeah, so
thank you.
I'll say no.
I bought a home once that had windows like this, and they're terrible. But if we're not trying to keep air conditioning in, and we're not trying to keep heating in because it's not used in the winter, I'm not in favor of this. And also, I wanted to know under performance, it says it will improve the security of the building. Have there been any issues so far?
Through Mr. Mayor, not to my knowledge.
Thank you. I'm not in favor of this.
Other speakers, please. No, we need a motion. Councillor Abel.
Well, Mr. Mayor, it's a comment. I know you asked, I did put my hand up, but I believe in protecting and moving our facilities and keeping them in good order as part of a responsibility. I do recognize it doesn't have to be thermal sealed for energy consumption for air conditioning, but you do have to protect aging structures, and the windows are usually around 30 years with today's technology. I know they say lifetime, but if they're in need of being replaced to reduce mold and other infrastructure, I mean, I think it's prudent that we upkeep it. It's kind of like our roads, Mr. Simonovskis says, you know, you could let it go down, but then the base it affects and it just becomes more expensive. So if it's an RFP, then we get the best price, because I get calls for windows minimum 3 times a day. I'm sure it's a very competitive business and will do very well.
I think you're exaggerating.
Well, it's probably more like 6. I'm just trying to be nice. I mean, I would support moving ahead with this if it's been identified. I don't know if it's been a request in previous years through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Downey or Mr. Simonovskis.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe we've had this. It was identified, but we didn't fund it we didn't request funding for last year.
Okay. Well, I mean, this is what we talked about in moving with our capital plan, and that's mitigating potential infrastructure failures, and that's by doing certain projects along these lines. So, I mean, I don't mind approving this as is, but if there's a feeling at council to do it in a future year, then I'm with that as well.
Councillor Humphries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I looked through the pictures of the windows, and they have been replaced since 1981, they're really in bad shape. And, you know, if it's one of our facilities, I know it's $20,000, it's not cheap, but they're really, really, really pathetic. And I don't want to have our buildings look so run down that it looks like we can't afford to fix a few windows. But question is, how many windows are we replacing? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't know exactly how many windows there are. I can find out though. And
there's a number of them.
There's a lot. Mr. Mayor, there's a lot around the facility. For $20,000, I mean, fortunately, I did get an estimate for my house, and they were like $33,000 for my windows, and I don't have that many. So anyway, for me, it seems like the right thing to do. I don't think windows that haven't been replaced since 1981 that are double glazed sealed units. I know the facility is only used in the summer, and but it hasn't been a priority. That's why they haven't been replaced for over 40 years. So I think it's time to do it.
Mr. Simonovskis, is it possible to get the number of windows, and then we can come back to this after lunch?
I will ask staff to identify that, yes.
So if we can get this after lunch, may I suggest we move on from this item? We can come back and put a number of the windows to it and then come back to it. I think that'll help council make the decision. Okay, so, I'm sorry? Okay, so motion to table this, Councillor Abel. Councillor Gardner, all in favor? Contrary? Thank you. Okay, we'll move to 11-11, which is the workstation refresh. And I'm sorry, I didn't make a list of who pulled these. I was just, okay. Councillor Thompson.
I guess my comment with respect to this one is this seems to be an annual issue that we debate. When I first came on council, there was a $5 million price tag with the renovation of Town Hall, and the driver of that was the need for more space. And at that time, council as a whole said no to it. We did agree to a part of it, which was the front counter area and some small reconfiguration. But it just every year seems to keep coming back and having a conversation about the need for more workspace. But at the same time, we tried to incorporate some of that into the JOC and other things we were doing and stuff. And so, you know, again, I'd like to see this from the whole perspective. We built on an additional floor on the JOC. Is there conversations to move people over? Does this need to be done? Again, it just keeps coming back to that whole town hall renovation project that we struggled with in the past, and it just doesn't seem to want to go away. So, you know, I guess I'm not in favor of it as it is now until we look at the bigger picture. We want to build a new facility. We have an existing one coming online in 2016. Where are all the people going? Is this truly a need, or is there not opportunities to reconfigure where everybody's working from? So that's my comment.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. My comment is similar, and I'm looking at under Class D estimate 2015 Phase 1. We have the refresh and the space plan. I would like to do the space planning first and then decide what needs to be refreshed or completely redone.
Mr. Simonovskis, this falls under you. Do you have any comments?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So This refresh is really to deal with the aging equipment that we have. So when we were in the process of evaluating the entire building, I guess now 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, that focus was to basically do the building floor by floor. There was space reconfigurations. There was a number of changes that resulted in a fairly substantial project. We've abandoned the notion of revitalizing the entire building rather than going through each department year over year and changing out cubicles, carpeting, painting, lighting, the elements of the building that have aged over this construction time. The phasing plan is really focused on where do we go. So if I was to describe for you, the first aspect of the project is going to be to determine what kind of furniture we're going to standardize on, and then use that same furniture, the modules, the Technion type of furniture throughout the building, and then the carpeting and the colors, and then just basically move through the building area by area. If it helps council, what I would suggest is we tag this as a B project and bring back a detailed phasing plan, if that would be helpful as far as informing council on the strategy moving through the building. But it is really a refresh of aged equipment and aged carpeting.
Other speakers, please. Councillor Gardner.
It was the aged carpeting that got me, because the whole area may be reconfigured, unless the carpet tiles are the carpet tiles. Are you able to pick them up and put them down somewhere else? And the other thing is, I'm all for replacing ergonomically correct furniture, because you can't expect staff to work in uncomfortable situations. But I just didn't think that the extent of this was warranted until we have the space plan. So the question about the carpet tiles.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to be clear, the question, currently we don't have carpet tiles in the existing building, it's roll carpet. But anything that we're changing is carpet tiles? I'm not sure what the question was.
Does that answer the question, Councillor?
Well, it's just again about the space plan. If we put down new carpet tiles, the space may be reconfigured. I would like to see the space plan first. With respect to the workstations, if they can be, reused, then that's fine with me. But I don't want to see anything I don't want to see painting or anything that's put on the floor that we might have to tear up and change. That was just my.
If I can just add to that, Mr. Mayor, so the intent is that when we change an area out, we're not going to redesign it or change it again later. The idea is, as an example, HR was it's an isolated space. It's a self-contained space, so that would have been our model space, so to speak, with the new furniture systems, the new carpeting, the new paint, and then that would be the demo for the rest of the building, in which case we would just move with that same theme throughout the whole building. So the intent wasn't to do something in an interim basis and then come back with a plan that says, oh, we're going to change it again. I think one of the key elements with regards to the furniture is that the new systems are smaller, which is going to allow us to create more space for more people. That's one of the key shifts that we're making with regards to the size of the workspaces as well.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Mr. Simonovskis, I know we have an evergreen program with regards to computers and technology and stuff, but do we not already have that in place, though, for furniture and equipment where we are continually, renewing or changing over furniture and equipment already?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, there's never been a program specifically for furniture renewal. The intent when we went forward with the overall building update was to do it at that time. Considering the size of that program, the cost of that program, and the focus of actually doing a year-over-year change-out, this is the preference right now. It's more affordable. It creates more of a sustainable change-out program rather than doing a total building refresh and then being stuck with a system for the next 20 years and having to do another total building refresh. It's more manageable to do refresh over time. So we may find after 20 years of refresh, we'll be back to the HR area to refresh after the next round. So it's really creating an operational change-out program rather than a capital change-out program.
Councillor.
Thank you, and I appreciate you clarifying some of these points, because when I first read it, it did sound a little bit more like the old renovation plan where there'd be construction and walls and all this stuff, and my little concern was that the Class D estimate becomes twice as much by the time we get done. But, you know, if it really is all about, you know, enhancing the workspace through, you know, a refresh of paint, carpet, and better furniture, you know, I'd be happy with the B pending a report.
Other speakers, please. Motion? Second? Councillor Gardner? All in favor? Contrary? Carried. One, 11, pardon me, 12, Councillor Thompson.
It was just a quick question. I just wanted to know, how many cameras are we talking about in terms of replacing, just so I have a sense of the total scope of the work? Because over a 4 or 5 year cycle, it's $125,000.
Through Mr. Mayor, I don't know the actual count of cameras, but I can get some information at least for the 2015, 2016 program if you'd like.
That's great. Thanks.
What, you want to know how many cameras?
Because I just want to get a sense, because, you know, I think we're all fairly familiar with the cost of cameras out there, and so I just want to get a sense of, you know, I guess what $25,000 is buying us.
When do you think you can get that information, Mr. Simonauskas?
Through Mr. Mayor, we'll reach out to staff. Just to be clear, though, the cameras also have to come with the technology behind the camera to do the recording, so it's not just the camera, it's also the black boxes.
I appreciate that. I'm fairly familiar with it from a retail perspective. Most retail outlets now have that capability and stuff for security reasons. I'm just,
Councilor Marac, can we get that information? If we bring that information back this afternoon, would council feel comfortable moving ahead with the decision? Can you get that information for us this afternoon, Mr.
I'll make my efforts to find out from staff.
Councilor Marcus? Councilor Gardner? Abel, pardon me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to ask that would also include the installation and removal and would be part of that estimate.
That's correct.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Abel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is replacement, so I'm not seeing the AFLC cameras on this. Through you, Mr. Mayor, it may be off topic, but just so I have a sense, there are cameras installed or being installed. Exterior, we specifically talked about the skate park in the front entrance and the back entrance.
Mr. Simonauskas?
Yes, the camera systems at the AFLC were upgraded as part of the renovation project. There's still some additions that we're making, which we have separate funding for, but that's all been upgraded to the high definition cameras as well. So.
Sir?
Specifically, Mr. Mayor, through you, if I could ask, are they on the exterior skate park, front entrance, back entrance?
There is one camera that's right near the front entrance that's intended to cover that front area, including the skate park. So there is one camera there. It's on the, as you approach the building, it's on the right underneath the soffit. And I believe we have one at the back as well to monitor the parking lot area. That's existing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, if we're going to come back, let's hold our discussions until we get that information rather than do this twice. A motion to table. Councillor Abel, thank you. Councillor Thompson, second. All in favor? Contrary? Carried. Thank you. 115, Councillor Gardner. 1115, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I always get a little nervous when I see something that says work is necessary for from a health and safety perspective to reduce town liability. So the way things are now, if we don't approve this, are we in possible violation of the health and safety code or actual infractions?
Mr. Simonauskas?
Through Mr. Mayor, if I can just turn council to pages 1116 and 1117, just provides a visual of the condition of the stairwells, of the stair areas. The one on page 1116 is a little difficult to see, but there's been some settling on the steps themselves, and you can see it mostly on the top step, but the steps have actually shifted. And of course, 1117 is fairly obvious as to some of the challenges we're having there. Now, 1117 is accessing the old library. There is a health and safety concern with this, but there's also, of course, the larger debate as to what the future decision for that facility will be. But I would suggest that in the interim, we at least repair the stairs to minimize any risks there.
Thank you.
Mr. Simonovskis, this would be these are two stairways to the old library?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, the one on page 116 is the stairway to the, just behind the Church Street School, going from the new library parking lot up to the west or the back side of the Church Street School. And then the other stair is in the area, but it's more north. Yeah, that's the old library. The page 17 is behind the old library, and the one on page 16 is approaching the Church Street School from the existing new library parking lot.
Notwithstanding the suggestion, given that we're looking at doing a fair amount of work in that area, is this something that could be held off, if you will, until we actually come to a resolution, which really isn't that far away in terms of looking for some council direction? Just your professional opinion, Mr.
What we can do is we can I'll check with staff to see if we can close off the stairs on 117 and see if we can at least minimize any risk, especially with the winter coming. If there's a decision made, and we can then proceed with, I guess, with option, I don't know what, option B or option C, and pending any decisions council makes on a larger area, then we can determine the future works in this area.
Could I suggest, council, we table this until perhaps no, actually maybe a B? Well, no, it's just a suggestion here. If we're looking at doing something over and above this, that would simply be my suggestion, Councilor Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. I just got one question. I'm just curious because I do realize when it comes to landscaping in this form, by the time if we approve this and by the time it would go out to tender, would it be realistic to say that they would actually get this done before their season would end? Like, would it not then fall within the springtime anyway? So I'm just wondering, as the mayor is suggesting, that we can perhaps wait until we get back any reports with what we'll be doing in the area?
Yep, this is a 2016 project, so it would be happening in the spring of 2016.
Yeah. Councilor Gartner.
In the meantime, I do like Mr. Simonovskis' suggestion that this looks pretty rough on page, whatever page we're on, 17, 16, 17. I do like the idea of kind of preventing the public from using this, because that does look like a liability issue.
Is there a motion then? B?
Mr. Downey?
If I may, through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Downey just has a concern. The cadets use these stairs, so we will have to close half of the stair only.
Make it, I think the goal would be to make it safe.
Okay.
B. I'd like to move B.
Second, please. Councilor Gartner. So it's B pending a further, which I think will come to fruition as we get some of the reports back that we're looking for from other items. All in favor of B then? Contrary? That is carried. By the way, the pictures are a big help in all these projects.
Yeah, absolutely.
119, Councilor Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, we got money for this, and, obviously it's a yes. But my concern is that this, it's not that old. It's 2005, and we're only 2015. How long are, for example, the pool liner, how long is that supposed to last? And if it gets replaced, what kind of a warranty are we going to have on it? 10 years to me doesn't seem to be an acceptable length of time. And it's not even 10 years because we've been having trouble for at least the last year, if not the last year and a half. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Downey?
Mr. Simonovskis or Mr. Downey?
Or Mr. Simonovskis?
I'm not sure who's...
This is going to be a joint response. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the project is, because of the Canada 150 funding, we accelerated this project. So that's one reason why it's showing up now. Also, it's an opportunity to replace that liner. If we can have it 2/3 funded, that just makes economic sense. We do know we're having some challenges with the liner. I mean, that has been identified over the last 5 or 6 years. As far as the warranty of the product, maybe Mr. Downey has more information on that, as I wasn't, I'm not privy to all the details of the actual liner product.
Mr. Downey?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, the pool liner is what we call a Mirtha system. It has about it generally was looking at about a 20-year life cycle. The liner has given us some challenges with regards to how we are using it and some of the installation issues that we had with regards to that. We took this opportunity between ourselves and IESTA to leverage funding in order to look at replacing this at this time. It's right now functioning properly. There's no issue related to leakage or anything related to that. However, we felt that at some point it needed to be replaced, and this was a good opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
So the new liner that we get, we're going to have a 20-year warranty on it? What kind of warranty are we going to have?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the product is normally warranted by the installer, and so any repairs that were required as a result of the warranty of the installer when we built the SARC have come and gone. The manufacturer themselves only warranties the product, not the installation.
Thank you.
So installation and use of the liner was our biggest issue, not the liner, not the quality of the liner itself.
Mr. Elliott, just a sec, Councillor. Mr. Elliott.
I just wanted to draw to your attention that this, together with 2 other projects on this list, have been pre-approved for 2016 by Council already, and it was in connection with the federal 150 grant. And so these have already been pre-approved. They're included on this list for transparency to the public and to remind you that we've already included these as part of the 2016 capital.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, and I've marked it off with a check mark. I'm just trying to ensure that we get a better service life out of whatever we put in. And I know we've had issues. I know there was a pool closure, at least one significant pool closure. I don't know if it was for the liner or not. But to me, it's just not acceptable. So I'm hoping you'll do the very best you can to make sure it's improved in the future.
Any other speakers to the item? Motion, please. Councillor Gardner. Motion? We haven't got one. A?
To readopt. A.
Second, Councillor Maracas. All in favor? Contrary? Carried. Thank you. 11-20, the Councillor Chambers-Davies system. Councillor Gardner.
This one really makes me angry because everything, this desk, the system, everything was redone. I don't know, it was in maybe 2007, 2008, maybe Mr. Downey knows. Why are we having so much trouble with this? I'm not sure whose jurisdiction that was. I thought it was Mr. Downey's at that point.
7 years later, technology changes big time.
I mean, if that's the answer, then I'll accept it. But if it's because we picked the wrong supplier or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody here who can answer.
Well, I mean, the only answer I can offer up is, I mean, this technology was here when I arrived in 2008, so maybe it was changed out in 2007. I'm not sure about that. But the issue that we're dealing with is a technology that's actually in the back room. So it's all the recorders and all the devices that are back there. That's the real issue. So what you have here is a system that works through that panel that communicates with a bunch of other systems in the back room. So it's the entire system that's actually due for an upgrade.
Thank you. This was done in my second term, so I don't know exactly the year, but it's not that old. But yeah, it's not acceptable.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, and I'm not sure if Mr. Simonovskis answered this or not, but it just does say that in the highlights or the explanation that in 2015 the video equipment was upgraded. I know in looking at the GC stream, it doesn't seem to me that the quality of the image has changed anything this year versus last year. And so, you know, when you say that the video equipment has been upgraded, are you also including the camera that captures and streams the GC meetings?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's actually, this was probably written with an expectation that it would have been done by now. There is a project that's still ongoing for 2015, and that's a joint project between us and is being led by IT. So there is activity still going on for 2015.
So I should put an asterisk there that the video equipment is still in process of being upgraded, because I know for myself, I think that there's a desire to see an improved image quality with regards to our meetings.
Other comments, please. Councillor Humphreys.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, just to confirm, this includes these screens back here that aren't clear, right? That one was never, that one should have been fixed, I believe, and it hasn't been.
That was replaced.
It was?
About a year ago. Mr. Simonovskis.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, that one is replaced. There's a fundamental difference between how these two projectors operate. This is actually a behind screen projector, and this is a front screen. So you're not going to get the same quality, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's...
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I thought it just wasn't fixed, but okay, thanks.
I distinctly remember hearing them drill into the concrete when they installed that. Any other comments on this item? May I have a motion, please, Sam? Councillor Gardner.
To approve.
Thank you. A. Councillor Thompson, second. All in favor? Contrary? It's carried. Councillor Abel, 1123.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, I mean, the report more or less explains the concern. I would have liked to, I guess we had to wait until this budget came around to address this. I was hoping we would have addressed this last year. It's idle, but I do know that we have a vision consultation coming forward, and we also have a facility. What was the second consultation?
Repurposing.
Repurposing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm wondering if this scope of work is going to have any, like, are we going to do something and then have to undo it for the scope of work? So, Mr. Mayor, my question is should we not be waiting for the consultation reports, the two of them, to come forward before we go ahead, so we don't duplicate our efforts and our expenses?
Mr. Simonovskis.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so it's just actually 2 points on this project. The facility is safe the way it is now. We have done some work this year to just make sure the building is safe. This work is brought forward because of the grant primarily, and I agree with you. And we've had this conversation as to what can we actually do to improve the building without actually spending money that we would have to undo later. So there's components of this proposal that we could do without knowing the outcome of the building. However, again, if timing with the precinct is relatively accelerated, this work wouldn't start till the spring, summertime anyway, so we may have a direction at that point in time as to the future uses of that facility. So I'm really here for council as to how they'd like to proceed. The work is, I don't know, maybe Mr. Elliott can talk to the grant timing or the grant conditions, because that's really what's driving this project.
Thank you very much. So you've phrased my concern. The removal of the asbestos and the contamination in the ground, I think it would be prudent for us to move ahead and get that work done. And that would prepare for the site for whatever we decide to repurpose it with. There's no point, I mean, we might as well get that ready for the next event, because that will have to take place regardless. My thought is on the electrical and patching it back up. I wouldn't want to do that just to undo it. But those two seem pretty straightforward. They have to be done before anything else can proceed. So I'm in favor of moving ahead, especially if the grant applies to that. I don't see something like replacing windows or anything like that. That may be a concern because we may replace the windows and then decide that we're going to blow open a couple of walls, and then that would be money that we could have used for something else. So if Mr. Elliott could speak to the grant application, it would probably clarify for myself and perhaps council at the same time.
Mr. Elliott, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the Canada 150 grant funding is primarily aimed for delivery during the 2016 year. I believe that projects have to be wrapped up by the end of March 2017. That's their normal timelines. And the funding is on the fundamental issues with respect to the building, the asbestos, the soils, and the electrical upgrades. So I'm not sure if that means primarily the main panel, but again, as you heard Mr. Simonovskis, it does not make sense for us to, for staff to proceed with aspects of the project that have the potential to be impacted by the study. But as you say, the soil, the asbestos, and for example, if it's the main electrical panel that has to be replaced, those things could go ahead. And we would hold off awaiting the others. This is a 16 project. It won't get started until the spring of 16. By that time, we should have a much better handle on these two reports.
Well, I do know one report's coming forward in 30 days, I think. So we're certainly on one of them. The other one didn't have a time limit, so I'm not sure when that one is. But we're not talking about those right now. I would recommend that we go ahead and get that asbestos and that ground contamination looked after as quickly as possible. In my mind, I would move ahead and approve those aspects of the project. I don't know if we can identify and state, do those first.
Mr. Elliott, just procedurally, given that we've already approved this project, what, to Councilor Abel's point, what could or what would or would we not include in the project?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's appropriate just to leave the project as fully approved. Clearly, you heard from Director Simonovskis that things that have the potential to be undone by these other studies will not proceed until the clarity is received through the studies and further direction of council. So I'm confident that the current approval that's in place for this project is sufficient, and that your director will handle the funds appropriately.
Thank you.
Well, my comment then, Mr. Mayor, would be to approve the project, proceed to tender, because I think this facility, we move very slowly. It's already been a year since we've acquired it.
Okay, I'll go to the other speakers and come back to you for the motion, Councilor Abel. Councilors Thompson, Gartner, and Baracus.
I guess that's really my question, is that when we acquired the armory, there was talk about moving forward to address those issues as part of a conditional assessment, and so here we are a year later. And so I guess, if we can get some comments about, why the delay? Why was there no work done in 2015? I even think we had a capital project that we discussed at budget time, and money was allocated for the conditional reassessment and so forth about it. So, I guess, to Councillor Abel's point, it does seem that things are moving extremely slow, because we always knew we had to do some soil, we had to do the asbestos, we had to do these points. But it's now, what, 12 months since we acquired it? And so what work, if any, has been done, and why not?
Yep. Certainly through Mr. Mayor, there has been work done on the facility. We've done minimal amount of work to make the facility safe. The idea with the asbestos was that we were never intending to remove the asbestos because it's safe where it is, it's contained. These projects are actually coming forward as an opportunity because of the funding, the grant funding that was on the table. We still have funding actually within that project, within the project for 2015. Now the soils issue isn't really an issue. We did testing on the site, and what we found was actually it was an old coal chute. That was the area that was problematic. So it was really a sense of just replacing some topsoil. And I guess it goes back to Councillor Abel's point as to how much money do we want to invest in this facility to prepare for a future use. And I agree with the approach. There wouldn't be any funding being applied to this project in 2016 if the grant wasn't on the table. If we are getting, and as we have been approved with the grant funding, what can we do with that money? And really what can we do so we spend it only once and not undo what we do? So I think that's a strategy that we'd like to go forward with. But just to stress, if we don't have this project approved, what we committed to doing at that facility has been done and the facility is safe.
So then, just looking at last year's budget, the report that was tabled in January, capital project 72241, where we allocated $250,000 to repair a number of different items, including some that said here. What's the status of that capital project?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the budget was actually reduced to 150, and only to allow us to do the minimum amount of work to actually comply with the reports. So we've spent about $15,000, I believe. So a lot of the work was done by staff. It wasn't a matter of security systems, basic mechanical repairs for the facility as far as heating and whatnot. It was really just to get the building operational.
Council?
I guess I'll take it offline just to better understand why some of the work, and if the dollars were there, were not done. Because some of the same items that was in that estimate of probable repair costs is being identified here. And I think we'd all just want to see that building utilized to its best degree, right? And so we want to see these problems or issues addressed, and so we can move forward with it.
Councilor Gardner, Councilor Maracus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, I'm fine.
Councilor Maracus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Councilor Thompson brought up my points. Thank you.
Councilor Abel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the washroom facilities, if we were to have an event there, so far we only had the one event that I'm aware of, and that was the Optimus beer tasting event. I do believe we had a farmer's market once. But in that case, we had to bring in porta potties to, so, you know, this, in my mind, having washroom facilities is sort of like a necessity, and we're not addressing that issue. I mean, I'm bringing it up here at a budget meeting a year later. I don't know, Mr. Mayor, what it is we have to do to charge and do something, but I'm hoping that eventually we're going to get something done so that we can use and enjoy that facility. The bare minimum would have put in a couple of washrooms so that we wouldn't have to rent porta potties, which I think is probably just about the lowest way we can go on a scale in providing a service to our residents. So this is where I'm trying to get something getting going, and I think we're sort of lending that to this discussion here. I know we have reports coming now. I mean, it just pains me to see nothing being done with this. But I think those points are taken, and if you get the flavor of what we're trying to say, then I'll reserve my comments again and say we should approve this project. The director understands that he won't duplicate, but let's get some of these situations addressed.
Motion, Councilor.
I would put forward number 8, please.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, if I can make one comment, can I suggest that this be actually put as a class or a Schedule B project? And what I would like to suggest is, based on the work that's actually happening very soon with the whole cultural precinct, that we come up with a floor plan to identify any other needs that council is looking for, bathrooms, anything specific to actually get that building to a higher usage, and we can make sure that work gets done. And then if there's any more significant changes based on the precinct direction, we can do those future.
Councilor.
If I may, to the director, we're also waiting on another report on the repurposing. So I think you're going to want to wait for that one as well. And Mr. Mayor, since council last week, we never gave or received any idea when that report was coming through. Perhaps we should ask the director when he sees the second report on the repurposing of facilities coming through, so that we have an idea how long this is going to take before we even address it.
Mr. Downey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't give council an answer to that right now. When AECOM had presented their RFP to us, they proposed a timeline which would have seen a report come by the end of this year. However, council recently gave approval to move forward with that project, so I haven't had an opportunity to meet with AECOM. I will be doing that this week, and we will be going through a work plan, and I'm happy to communicate to council when we anticipate a report coming back. I'm hoping that we are going to be able to coordinate a response from FOTEN and AECOM. However, I can't assure council of that at this point until I have an opportunity to talk to AECOM.
But we can assume that it would be before 2016? Is that fair?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I would suggest it would probably be in January of 2016, very, very early in 2016, but like I say, I haven't had an opportunity to sit down with the ACOM and have a discussion with them. And when I do, I will push extremely hard to try to get something in by this calendar year, but I can't promise that's going to happen.
Councilor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, we don't even have a plan for this bill. I know we want the residents to use it, and we just don't really know exactly how we're going to use it. I would hate to see us spend some money, and I mean, I understand fully that we need bathrooms in there, but at the end of the day, we might decide to put the bathrooms on the total opposite end. So without an actual plan in place, I don't think it would be smart of us to move ahead and do anything just at this time. And as far as asbestos, as long as we don't touch it and we don't, you know, we don't do anything with it, it stays safe. I'd prefer option D and just wait till we get back some actual plans. Maybe, as Mr. Simonoskis has mentioned, some kind of a floor plan with thoughts that we feel that it needs to look like before we go forward with anything.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. And while I understand that we want to make sure that we do things right, again, I go back to last year's capital project sheet, and it lists a whole bunch of, to me, things that had to be done regardless of the future outcome of that building. It talks about replacing a corroded water supply, replace pipe insulation, replace intake louver, new combustion air intake, hot water circulation pump, electrical panel, brick chimney. I mean, these are all things that, regardless of the final use, I think they have to be addressed. And so, you know, I want to make sure that we're not ignoring those things that need to be done, in my eyes, regardless of the final outcome. And so I think there is an opportunity to move forward and deal with some of these things regardless of the future outcome of it. And I would like to see that report come back, at least outline, okay, what has been done, what's still outstanding. There are some electrical and mechanical things, and so let's move forward with this. I don't want to see further delays because we're waiting for that report if there's some work that needs to be done now, and it's going to be done regardless. That's all.
Councilor Abel.
Yeah, we have on the motion A, and Councilor Maracus has spoken that he would favor B. And, you know, Councilor Thompson and I are both saying that this is sort of moving at a snail's pace. We've got reports coming, and we don't see this even being addressed until the 17th. We haven't even gone to the community yet to ask them what's going on. Meanwhile, I've got service groups, farmers market, performers and with the concerts in the park that all want to contribute, to have a say, and they think it's a wonderful idea. And we haven't even opened the door for them because we're throwing up all kinds of ways to delay that process, which is reports and waiting and waiting and waiting. If we can't remove the asbestos until we receive all the reports in 2017, I just don't understand where the inertia is. When are we going to get going on just the very basic, which is to get that facility with the grant money that's been approved to go ahead and move ahead? So that's why I'm saying we should at least tender and get the asbestos, get that groundwater contamination, but we have lots of other things that we want to get going. But that's why I'm saying approve it as is, because that would speak and move those two items forward.
Okay, we actually, at this point, we don't have a second.
All right.
Okay, well, Councillor Thompson has just seconded it. A. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I agree with Councillor Abel and Thompson. There's some mandatory things we need to do. One of my concerns, it was from last year as well, is the asbestos. I think regardless of what we do with the building, and it's a heritage building, we're not going to do anything to harm the building. I think we need to move forward quickly to remove the asbestos. That building is going to be highly utilized by many community groups, and they're anxious to get going for just some of the basics, like Councillor Abel mentioned, the farmers market and others. So I think we need to move forward with this quickly. It's got to be safe. Just another quick question. There are restrooms in the building, right? We just cannot use them?
Mr. Simonoskis or Mr. Downey? One of you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, there are washrooms in the building, and yes, we can use them. The issue is whether there's enough. depending on the permit that is going in the facility, generates a need for additional washrooms, and that was the issue that Councillor Abel was bringing up, that we then had to bring in some portable washrooms. So there are available washrooms, however, not in sufficient quantity in order to permit activities as Councillor Abel has indicated.
Councillor.
Thank you. I think we need to move forward on this right away.
Okay. Motion A is on the floor. Calling the vote, please. Councillor Thompson? All in favor of A? Contrary? A is carried. Thank you. The last one in this section, then we'll take a break, is 1126, library brick repairs. Councillor Gardner, you pulled that? Councillor Gardner?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was kind of lost still in the armory. So again, we're not exactly sure what we're going to do with the old library. Is this the new library? Yeah. Shh. Okay, so how old is the new library and why is this happening through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Simonovskis?
Sorry, through Mr. Mayor, just to repeat the question, I was just having some information passed to me.
How old is the new library and why is this happening?
15, 16 years. About 16 years, Mr. Downing?
Yeah.
You probably know best.
Through Mr. Mayor, the library was built in 2000.
So 15 years.
Why?
So
I'm almost speechless because none of the houses I've ever owned, and they've never been younger than this or older than this. I think you know what I mean. I've never had brickwork with any of the houses that I've lived in, and I don't understand why it should be happening here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is due to a moisture water issue. So, and it's an isolated area. The idea with doing the repair is to first isolate the problem. If there's a problem with either moisture coming in from above or from behind, and isolating that, and then making the repairs to the actual facade or the brick veneer. So it's not a common problem, but it is caused by moisture and water, and that's something that we need to mitigate.
Thank you. So, poor design, poor building practice, poor workmanship, bad luck.
Life.
Pick one of the above, Mr. Simonovskis.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know exactly what the cause of this is. If we are able to identify the cause, I'd be happy to report back to council on that.
Just again, to prevent these things from happening in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Humphreys, you wish to speak?
And you know, we need to do this right away, and it's a shame that it's happened. And it looks like there's some sort of, just the way the, I don't know if it's the roof or what it is that's causing freezing to go through into the mortar and cause the damaged brick. But let's get it done quickly, and it looks like if we could prevent it from ever happening again, which is, I think, the main thing for this one.
Councillor Abel?
And Councillor Humphreys is speaking to my comment, which would be the cause. And this typically looks like water drainage pouring over very quickly. So maybe something's blocked and rainwater, instead of being directed down a drain, is pouring over on top of the surface at a very high, fast rate. And that's what it looks like to me. So I'm sure you're going to figure that all out when you put this money into it. It seems isolated. And there's probably an explanation for the cause of it.
Any other speakers? Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through you, Mr. Simonovskis, while we do this, I know it's not in the report, but will we be cleaning up some of the bricks also? Because I noticed that there's some black marks and some stains along some of the other parts of the bricks. I'm just wondering, will we be doing a power washing also while we do this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that was budgeted for, but I can ask that we look into it, yeah.
Thank you. I just figure while we're doing that, if we're going to make it, look new and clean up the area, we might as well clean up the rest of the bricks also.
Any other comments? All in favor then? Oh, boy, we need a motion. Thank you, Madam Clerk. A, Councillor Abel? Councillor Marcus, second. All in favor? Contrary? That is carried. Council, may I suggest that we finish those items, take a break? Councillor Thompson, are you moving that? Can we be back here, please, by 11:05? Thank you. For 15 minutes. Okay, well, if I say back at 11, then you might be back at 11:05. Okay, 11. Councillor Abel, Councillor Thompson, all in favor? Contrary? That's carried. Thank you.